Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon from whatever part of the country you're joining us today. So what we'll be running through today is the grant opportunities and the sort of the process to get the project started for your nonprofit specifically. My name is Branovan, and I've been with The Grocer for almost 7 years now, but I had the pleasure of working with nonprofits from coast to coast to coast and help planning their projects. So idea until the farm arrives on site. That's where a lot of my expertise is. And then we have a larger team to support with the training and implementation. So make sure that you're able to grow fresh produce year round for your organization. In terms of agenda for this webinar, what we'll focus on is making sure that you have the right process in place to apply for the right funding and to make sure that you have the best odds of success with the funding application that you're looking forward to applying to. So how to get started, the planning behind the grant application itself, what grants to look at, and then submitting and also the reporting portion of it. So we'll jump into how to get started. So before applying to any grant, it definitely takes a bit of effort to figure out what you want to do for the organization and why you're sort of looking to grow food year round. So we'll jump into some of the things to do in advance of looking at grants and following through the whole grant application process. So it really would make sense to have the conversation internally at the organization, figure out what would be the desired end goal of this project, what are the key measurable outcomes, what are your experiences in previous projects and key learnings. So if you've done a community garden before or traditional greenhouse, what are the key learnings there? Engaging with the different communities nearby and the market if you're looking to potentially sell the food locally. Who would be leading this project from a planning perspective and an operation perspective, and who will be also supporting with the current programs and how we'll be supporting the current program. So if you're already having a community kitchen or you have a food bank, how would this operation be supporting your current existing initiatives? So these are sort of complex questions, but having those right conversations internally to sort of have this sort of thought process behind the application would definitely help in the long term. So how have other organizations have done this before? So they may have a focus group with their board or members of that work at the nonprofit to sort of have these ideas jotted down, and ultimately having sort of a concise plan moving forward will definitely help with your application process, and having different sort of opportunities to look at. So if we're looking to distribute the food, how much food can be distributed via selling to a community partner or to an existing food operations, then having that type of details figured out definitely helps when you start diving into the application itself. So what we typically tend to focus on is, once we have those conversations and some of those questions answered, is diving down into the project pillars. So is this going to be focused on the local food system, improving food security, food sovereignty? Is it going to be more of a social enterprise where you're looking to generate some revenue for the nonprofit? So you're less reliant on government funding for day-to-day operations. Are you looking at more from the education and training perspective? It doesn't have to be one or the either right off the get-go, but having an idea where this project lies is very crucial, because it also sort of guides you through the process of figuring out which grants actually make sense for the organization. So when we say the local food sovereignty piece or the food security piece is growing food to make available to your members at a reduced cost or via community food box. The social enterprise model is where you're looking to sell some of this food, and this could be under a different brand. The brand that represents the nonprofit may be selling to a retailer, to local businesses, where you're able to generate some revenue, and that revenue stream can be used for your day-to-day operations for the nonprofit. And then the education and training component. So if you're running an after-school program and you want youth to get involved, this could be a sort of a hands-on learning experience for youth. So once you have these sort of pillars figured out and where you typically want to lie or focus on, then there's different government funding streams and foundation streams that you could look at and potentially apply. And again, the project can evolve. but specific funders typically have certain expectations of what they're looking to fund and what they're not looking to fund. And another sort of primary component to this piece here is where is the food going to be distributed? So we'll really work with you on that component because a lot of the funding applications will want to make sure that if you're growing food, you're able to also distribute the food locally. So here are a couple of examples that a few of our current nonprofit partners have already are done or are currently doing. So weekly food boxes, so creating an opportunity for the community members to subscribe for a weekly box of vegetables that are grown year-round. Again, this could be weekly, bi-weekly, could be at a reduced cost, can be a pay-as-you-go method as well. Selling the food to local institutions. This is more for a social enterprise model if you're looking to generate some revenue or even subsidize some of the produce costs for community members by selling the produce to a local school or a healthcare center per se. And there's a third component, which is potentially creating a brand and also selling to local grocery stores or businesses year round. Again, this would be partnering with a local retailer. For example, if there is within a 15-kilometer radius or 30-kilometer radius, there's a few grocery stores approaching them and being like, we want to brand and sell this produce to you year round. What are your current price points? What are you looking to sell at the store? And sort of having those conversations started. And then a lot of the nonprofits we work with also will donate a certain portion of everything they grow. For example, 10% of everything they grow could be distributed to the local food bank per se. So having this sort of distribution model figured out really also helps sort of finalize what the funders are looking at in terms of the day-to-day operations of the project. So for example, certain funders want to make sure that a portion of the produce is sold from the operations to ensure that you can sustain future expenses. So wages, seeds, growing materials, things like that. And certain funders also want to make sure that some of the outcomes, the more of the social outcomes are also met so that you're providing X amount of healthy options for community members locally throughout the year. Be it meals served or be it food boxes distributed or jobs created. So you want to make sure that you're able to have a distribution model that also reflects the mandates of the funder as well. So in terms of planning, so once you have your scope figured out, where is the project going to lie? Is it more of a food security project? Is it more of a social enterprise model? Is it an education and training program? And then you have the ways you want to distribute food. The next step is to sort of have those internal conversations at the organization level. So be it some leadership meetings to present the project to the board and get approvals. Ideally having a letter of support, either signed from an executive director or the board to be available, which would be incorporated in the grant application. Also doing some site work, which is where are we going to put this? Where can the farm be put? Does it have enough power, water access? And do you have storage space for food that's being harvested? And who will be doing some of the site work? So the hooking up the power, the water connections, the site prep, who can do that sort of contracting work. Some organizations are to do it internally where they have a facilities manager, for example. Some organizations have to sort of hire an external contractor. So having those initial leadership conversations to move forward with the grant, maybe letters of support signed from the executive director or the board, having an idea of what the site preparation would look like and who would sort of be leading that and what are the associate costs. And then finally, having all this sort of into a few supporting documents that would, again, be attached to the grant application that would be submitted. So what we're seeing is over I would say the last 2 years, the requirements for grants are becoming a bit more complex, and there's certain sort of thresholds and requirements that be putting in. And again, this comes into play with a lot of the supporting documents. So letter of support, financial contributions in terms of in terms of in-kind contributions. So if the funder will pay 50% of the project cost, where would be the remaining 50% coming for? Is the nonprofit organization able to back the project themselves, or are you having other funders involved? So having that in a written document to attach. And now we're also seeing some funding applications ask for financial statements, site documents in terms of where you're putting this, financial commitments from other organizations, and also even supporting plans like a business plan or previous project success documents to validate that the organization has the capacity to do a project as such. So again, all of this sort of scope work, contracting sort of work, having those supporting documents, once done, you could definitely leverage those for different grant opportunities. So once you have this already in place, then you could start applying to a few options. And typically what we're seeing now is a lot of the granting programs are opening up for a short window of time. So they might say we open on April 1st and we close in 30 days. So sometimes it really helps to have all this work done ahead of time. So once that funding program opens up, you have all your documents ready, you have your letter of support, you have contracting quotes, you have you have estimates already in place, and you have financial contributions from the board already to move on the project. So you're not sort of in a time crunch to meet the deadline. So let's dive into some specifics about grants and where you could look for grants and what kind of grants are currently available. And again, a lot of the grants are sort of region specific, and each province territory has access to different funding opportunities. So a lot of the times you could look at the regional level, which may be Northern Ontario, Northern BC specifically. So there might be funding programs that open up specifically for those regions. There may be also more provincial opportunities. So BC-wide, Ontario-wide, Quebec-wide, Manitoba-wide, and then there's the federal funding programs as well. So be it Agriculture Canada or Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, things like that. So as you know, regional allows more of a regional approach to the funding. So they're looking at working with specific communities in specific regions, and they're looking at specific mandates. When you're coming to a federal sort of level, there's a lot more people applying to those. And sometimes they may have specific, very hyper-focused mandates for those projects as well. So the more applicants they have, the funding gets spread across all applications. So sometimes they may be only able to fund 20%, 30%, 40% of a project. And those who are able to make a larger in-kind contribution are seem to be a bit more favorable as well. So once you start diving into specific funding, you want to look at a few criteria. So who can actually apply? So are nonprofits actually eligible? What are the criteria or mandates? So what is the outcome that the funder is rating or looking at? Is it social? Is it increasing capacity? Is it making improving the food sovereignty within a region? So really understanding those, because sometimes it may be a food project, but the mandates don't directly align, and sometimes and you may be denied just because they want the specific outcome that the project is not highlighting. And then you also want to understand what kind of application process this is. Is it one stage, two stage, even three stage sometimes? Do they need additional documentations at the later stages? So if you submit an EOI, which is an expression of interest, when you get qualified, then there's a stage 1 or stage 2, or there's an application 2. So you want to make sure that you're meeting all those deadlines and you're submitting responses to those emails pretty quickly. Because sometimes you may have an EOI to submit or expression of interest, and within 15 days you get a response, and then you have 2-3 weeks to fill the second stage out, and you want to make sure that you're meeting those timelines. And then again, another caveat to this is making sure you have all those supporting documents, like I mentioned earlier, letters of support, financial contributions, business plans, sometimes previous community engagement documents, financial statements, etc. And then lastly, especially as you start moving forward with stage 1 or stage 2 applications within a specific fund, funders are also looking for what kind of financial contribution the nonprofit is willing to make. So if they were to fund 50% of the project, does a nonprofit or your organization have the capacity to fund the remaining rest? If not, who else would be sort of contributing to that project? And is that commitment already made? And we're starting to see a lot more of those conversations being happening, that they want previous commitment from other funders, and they want to know that you actually have the commitment on the organization's behalf also to move if you get partially funded. Outside of that, the other contribution percentages is something that you really want to look at as well. So some funders are only willing to spend 50% of the project costs or fund 50% of the project costs and expect the remaining 50 or 40 or 30% to come externally. So making sure that you're meeting those thresholds as well. And the most important part here is what expenses are also eligible. So some folks will fund training, others won't. Some folks will only fund capital costs. They won't fund ongoing costs or operating costs like growing material seeds. So really making sure that you're applying for the right fund and you're sort of having those right line items in there. So here's just an example that we have from a federal funder. And you just want to make sure that you're looking at the criteria or eligibility checklist before applying. So sometimes they're very specific on who can apply and what you need to apply. So as you see here, if you're one of the two, one of the following organizations, you can apply. So nonprofits, you can apply, but you have to be in operations for at least 2 years. So those are certain criteria that you have to really look at before submitting in your applications. And another example here is what are eligible activities. So what can't you do? So you cannot buy a passenger vehicle, lease equipment, include renovations or projects that are for profit or commercial gain. So these are certain things that you want to look at. So for example, if you're looking at starting a commercial operation and you need a food truck to deliver that food to the store, as you see here, that passenger vehicle or delivery truck will not be considered a minivan. Leasing equipment. So for example, if you're looking for a packaging equipment and you want to lease it instead of buy it, that wouldn't be eligible. And if you're also looking at generating revenue from this, some funders are also don't consider that sort of eligible expense. So you really want to make sure that you meet the criteria of the funders, and then you're sort of applying with the specific line items that sort of fit their criteria. So one question that I get frequently asked is, can we sort of apply to multiple funding streams? So yes, that is something that is very common and quite a few folks will do, but it is somewhat difficult. So you have to sort of find a primary funder. So the primary funder is anyone that's going to be contributing over 50%, making sure what their expectations are of contributions. So are they okay with being the primary funder? Do they fund 50% or more? What are their timelines? So if they were to fund a project today, when do they want to see the outcomes? And do they already need a secondary funder for you to receive your primary funding? So do you already have a commitment from someone else, that some other funder that's going to back the remaining portion of the project? And then who is the second funder? Do we line both those timelines line up together? And do they need a primary confirmation from a primary funder to actually be the second funder? So as you see, there's a lot of sort of overlap here, and sometimes it's a bit difficult given that certain funders operate under different timelines. Their payment structures are different. So they may require some financial contributions from your organization or the nonprofit to make sure that they approve. So it is doable, and few folks have done it, but it takes a lot of planning and sort of working out details with both funders on both sides of things. So here's just an example of a scenario in terms of what contributions are required and what can be funded. So as you see here, the total project cost is around $350,000. So that's a one farm setup. So commercial operation includes the farm, the training, the site preparation, etc. So as you see here, the site preparation is a non-cash contribution from the organization or the applicant. So they would be covering the site preparation costs, so hooking it up to power, site preparation, things like that. And then you have your in-kind cash contribution. So the organization itself, the board is approved to spend around $50,000 on the project. So the total contribution here is $80,000, $30,000 non-cash and $50,000 cash. And then there's a federal grant that would cover $150,000. They have a provincial grant that covers the $120,000. So that sort of gives you an idea of how the project can be covered. And again, like I mean, you can stack different provincial grants as well, but you just have to make sure that you're meeting the timelines, the requirements, the criteria of each funder. The more funders they are, the harder the more complex it gets. It's just because everyone has different criteria, different timelines, their payment terms are a bit different, there's contracts signed, so it just a bit more complex there. but here's just an example on what can be done and what some folks have done for their organization. So we'll jump into the submission part of the application. And again, we can definitely work with you on the application and support you. But here are a few things that we typically tending to see over the last 2 years. So a lot of different funders are switching from more of a direct application and email submission to a portal form of submitting. So the key thing to notice for that is that you would need to create a portal, and sometimes it takes a week or 2 weeks to actually create the portal, create your login. So if the funding application opens up for a month and you haven't really created a portal, it might take you 2 weeks to actually create the portal. So now you have 2 weeks to do everything. So it sort of gets into a very short period of time. So what you want to do is if you're in a specific region and you're working with specific funders, you may want to create a portal already and have that available. So once the fund opens, your login's there. You just have to fill up the application online and submit directly. Making sure that you're attaching all the supporting documents, because sometimes with some certain federal funders and even sometimes provincial funders, if you don't support an attaching document, you're sort of declined automatically. Some folks sometimes will send a friendly reminder saying that you forgot to attach this, but sometimes you just automatically get declined. So you want to make sure that you have all your supporting documents, letter supports, estimates, contractor estimates, financial commitments, if they're financial statements, all that sort of signed and sort of attached to the application. And then once you submit, you want to make sure that you get a confirmation from the funder that they've received your application. And then you want to be constantly making sure that if they follow up with you on the portal or if they send you an email, you're responding in an adequate time. So for example, if you forgot to sign a letter of support and they sort of follow up with you on email, they might put a 1 week or 5-day timeline, or they'll decline your application. So just making sure that you're confirming with the funder and double checking that if they send you any email responses, you're responding with an adequate amount of time. And then making sure that if there's any other secondary application that's required to be filled, you're filling those on time as well. So if you're submitting an EOI or an expression of interest and you get invited to fill up the second stream or second stage of application, you're filling those on time as well. Once you get approved, there's a sort of process there. They typically have a signing contract, they have timelines, they have contributions, and they have reporting expectations. So just making sure you're going through that process with them. And if unfortunately the application is denied, it is also key to ask for some feedback. Sometimes it may be that they just ran out of funding for that quarter or that year. They might ask you to reapply next year, which we've seen happen a few times. Sometimes they might let you know that the project just wasn't a fit. Sometimes they might even offer you an opportunity for the next quarter, maybe asking you for a higher in-kind contribution. So sometimes it's not the proposal itself. It may just be the logistics of their funding and what's left in their budget for the year. So I'll jump into some of the key funders that have funded previous projects for a nonprofit organization partners. So federal agencies that have supported this project in the past are Agriculture Canada, Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada. That agency has different arms across different provinces and territories. So they have the West, they have Prairie Can, they have Ontario, South and North. They have Quebec and the Atlantic region. And then there's a lot of regional and provincial funders as well. And again, their timelines and quarters operate differently. So there may be some times of the year where there's more funding available for some regions and others or not. And there's also foundations. So another example here is the community co-op community spaces opportunity. So there's different charities and foundations that are also looking to support community food initiatives. So as we know, the government fiscal year sort of wraps up at the end of the month, and there'll be new programs that are renewed in April. So what we typically recommend is having a refresh on all the different funding programs that you worked with in the past, or reaching out to different folks that you've connected with on the project to see if there's any new funding programs that are opening. So I could give you a few examples on other funders and what they've sort of, how their agency sort of works. And Agriculture Canada has a few programs last year. Unfortunately, they're currently closed, but if you want to sort of keep updated on their website, you could definitely check their website out. And once you scroll down to their funding programs page, you'll have a list of all their programs and services that are currently offered, open or closed. And if you scroll down for who you are and you put in, click nonprofit and you click apply, it'll create your short list funding programs that are currently open and also closed. Since a lot of the new programs have not been released yet, they're probably going to be released in April. It'd be crucial to sort of keep checking that list because there will be a few funding programs that open up. They typically have programs every year. And there was one program that was open for 4 years and it just came up to an end. So it should be renewed, or they might restructure it and have a different name and criteria for it. But there is a program and it was called Local Food Infrastructure Fund. So that may be something that quite a few want to check out. And again, this sort of chart gets updated quite frequently by the government agency as well. And another example here is, this is for Northern Ontario. It's called the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. So there's your Enhance Your Community stream. It is to support communities and organizations that contribute to a healthy and strong community. Who is eligible? You have municipalities, Indigenous communities, and non-for-profit organizations. I know this stream is currently open, so you have to create a login and actually contact one of their representatives. They'll have a preliminary conversation with you and see if you're a fit, and then they'll give you a login so that you can fill up the application online. So on our end, what we want to do is be able to support and sort of help you with your planning steps. So our team is here to support you in terms of defining your project scope, what works, what have other nonprofits seen success with, and we could definitely support you with that funding process. So the next step is here, if anyone's super interested, you could reach out to Holly or myself and book an introductory call, and then we'll sort of come up with a tailored funding approach based off of your goals and what you're looking to do and what kind of resources you have at hand. And I know Holly's on this call here, and maybe I'll let her introduce herself quickly here.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. So, yeah, my name's Holly. I've been working with Grocer specifically for the past 3 years or so. And then before that, I've been kind of in the grant funding and non-dilutive funding space for the last 5 or 6 years. So yeah, if you have never applied to any grants before, or if you have some expertise and experience in this area, like, either way, it's good to have a chat and see what could potentially be available for your project. We, as you saw by what Brandon's been covering in the presentation so far, we have a lot of examples of how people have done this in the past. So it's likely that we know another organization with a similar profile to yours that you can kind of take inspiration from. So yeah, definitely reach out if you're interested. And like I said, you don't need to have kind of a set plan or anything before you reach out. Like, that's kind of what we're here for. So even if you just want to have kind of a introductory conversation, then, we're all ears, and we're definitely open to helping in whatever way we can and keeping you updated on funding opportunities that might be coming up if, there's nothing available at the current moment, which, yeah, like Brandon mentioned, the government fiscal year is just ending now. So hopefully there's going to be some new funding opportunities releasing in April.
Perfect. Thank you, Holly. And again, if you have any specific questions or you want to chat more about the project and how to source funding for your organization, don't hesitate to send me an email. It's brandon@thegrocer.ca. Does anyone have any questions? I know we've sort of went through this really quickly, but you could always contact me directly, again, at brandon@thegrocer.ca. But if anyone has any questions, we definitely have a bit of time here to run through them. I think there is one question here. Do you charge for this service? So for the introductory call and any sort of first conversations we have, we don't typically charge for that. We're here to work with you on your planning project. If you need any sort of hands-on support with grant writing or putting a feasibility study or putting a business plan, we do charge for that based on what you want us to do and what your expectations are. But typically for any of the conversations and finding the funds, we don't charge for any of that work. You cited 350,000 as a cost. Please explain, please. So 300, let me scroll back up here. I think it's this slide here. So the 350,000 is the total project cost if you were to do a one farm project. So let me go back here. So that is the farm itself. You have your site preparation costs, you have your training costs, you have your first year growing material costs, you have your shipping cost to deploy the farm to you. So that's the 350,000. So it's a total project cost of setting up this project. The farm, the training, the first year growing materials, the shipping costs, all that is included in that 350,000. So the farm itself starts at around 200 to 250, depending on what's required for the organization. And then you have all the added costs to make sure that the project's up and running. Yeah, correct. Yeah, so we do have different options available for what your end goals are. So for example, the question here is, do you speak about the educational farm you've developed? Yeah, so the difference between the educational farm and the commercial farm is, for example, if you're working with a school and the key intent here is not to be commercially growing food, but have space for youth to harvest, seed, things like that, the growing capacity of the farm is a bit different. So instead of having a weekly harvest of 900 heads of vegetables per week, you may have 350, but there's more space inside to have youth in the farm. So that's typically the major difference. So the farm itself from the outside will look the same, but once you walk in, you'll see that there's less growing equipment versus more. So if you're looking as an organization for more of an education opportunity, for youth and capacity building, then we could take out some of the growing equipment. So you're growing less per week, but you have more space in there and the cost is also reflected in that. But if you're looking to grow as much as you can, we will optimize the farm accordingly. So you're growing as much food as in there as possible. And I think there was a question on international organizations. There are a few different government agencies that will fund international funding. Typically, I would say the federal programs that I mentioned in this presentation today, not so much. But if you want to reach out to us, there are a few different other agencies that will help with international organizations, and there's also different foundations and charities that could also help with that work. There's one question here. What are the projected expenditures to run these units? So that's a great question. So in the planning steps, that's essentially what we focus on to make sure that your project is self-sufficient in the years to come. So based off of what your goals are, where you're putting the farm, we could give you some estimates on what those costs will be. So for example, what the living wage is in the community. So we hire someone in the community to run the farm. So based off the living wage in the community, based off your power cost, and then also an idea of what you want to grow and how much you're growing, we could give you a breakdown of how much the operational cost is. So once we know what the operational costs are, we typically make recommendations on how much of the food you need to sell to cover all those costs. So that pretty much makes your projects self-sufficient. And again, it varies across the country because some parts of the country, the power rates are a bit different, the price of food is a bit different, and the living wage is a bit different. So if you reach out to us directly, we could definitely give you some actual projections. And there's a question here on curriculum development. Yes, we do have a land-based curriculum already being developed. It's currently available and we don't charge for that curriculum. So if you're a school or working with a school, that curriculum can be offered to you at no cost. There's a question here about 2 schools and the students will operate the units. So in terms of like the operation, all the training would be provided to you. So what we typically do when working with schools is if there's a teacher that's overseeing the project, we'll provide them with all the necessary training. Again, like I mentioned, the curriculum is available for you. And in terms of labor, if you were to be growing at a commercial scale for a farm, you're looking at around 25 hours of labor per week. So that's seeding, harvesting. So you can split that role into multiple part-time role opportunities or a shift opportunity for youth. So we could definitely work with you based off of what your end goals are and sort of coming up with tasks for the kids to do at the school. Awesome. Thank you everyone for joining, and I hope everyone has a great day. So if you have any more questions or you just want to have a conversation with Holly and I, definitely reach out. My email again is Bradden at the grocer. And we could book some time and we could have a direct conversation. With that being said, thank you everyone, and hope to chat with everyone soon. Thank you.